Welcome to Shaq's house. That's our Shaq. You're now in Shaq's house. That's our Shaq. Welcome to Shaq's house.
Hey, what's up, Shaq Houses? How you doing? It's your boy, the one and only Shaq House here. Hope your week went well. Let me just say this first. I have got to learn how not to argue with people on the internet. Why? Because people on the internet are idiots. They're like Oswald Bates from In Living Color. If you recall, that was Damon Wayans' character on In Living Color, where he's in jail and often uses big words out of context because he doesn't understand what he reads. For example, the pancreatic philosophy, you understand, has syphilized my mucal membrane into a world. Oh yes, a world of nocturnal commissions. Hey, these motherfuckers, they can't read, but anyway, fuck them. That ain't what this is about. Today, we're going to be talking about a very obscure 90s villain, a 90s X-Men villain named Hazard. This is during the time when they made trading cards and action figures from Toy Biz out of these villains, but he didn't get a toy, he got a trading card. He's obscure, he's dead now, but I thought I'd give him a shout out and some spotlight. So check out my video, The Mutant Called Hazard. Well, actually, he was never called Hazard, but that's beside the point. Check it out.
Hazard. Hazard's mutant ability was the power to generate plasma energy. In its unharnessed state, the energy flickered around his body in a superheated state, agitating molecular structures upon contact to create explosive reactions. So anything in his immediate area ran the risk of being destroyed by his power, but Hazard himself had no means of directing his mutant power towards specific targets. But later, he learned to focus his power through electrical wires and crafted a cybernetic suit to facilitate this. His costume provided him with retractable metal cables in his gauntlets, which allowed him to contain his plasma energy and release it along guided paths. These cables could wrap around his targets, channeling enough plasma energy to incinerate a human being in seconds, leaving only a skeleton. They could also lash outwards at his direction, releasing an explosive charge upon impact to blast his way through barriers. Hazard's plasma effect also enabled him to levitate in his natural state and control levitation of others. His cybernetic suit allowed him to focus that power as well, with rocket boots granting him the power of controlled flight. We'll get to his fun facts and his history, but first, a commercial.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, do you like urban fiction, crime dramas? Do you like stories in the same vein as George Pelecanos? Then you'll love author Derek Scarzella's novels, The Vicious Game and Knuckle Crack Bone. Though both novels are set in Washington, D.C. during the time of the mid-2000s, they both involve the streets, money, sex, drugs, and compelling characters who have to make decisions about their lives and the forces that pull them back into the alluring world of crime. That's The Vicious Game and Knuckle Crack Bone. Both are available at Amazon. See the links below. Check them out. Some fun facts. Hazard was a childhood friend of Charles Xavier's. Their fathers were Dr. Alexander Ryking and Dr. Brian Xavier, respectively. Along with the Juggernaut's father, Dr. Kurt Marko, the trio worked along many covert and subversive science programs, including the Weapon X program and the Black Moon Project at Alamagordo, New Mexico. Carter's powers manifested in his teens along with accompanying seizures, and instead of teaching or helping him find the means to control them, his billionaire scientist father had him institutionalized and sedated in a hospital of his own creation, a Betty Ford clinic for superpowered people. Carter spent his entire life in that clinic until adulthood. He rightfully felt vengeful towards his father and even unwittingly engineered his own death. He managed to steal a file during his lucid moments and sent it to Charles Xavier. When word broke out about the file's theft, it was traced back to Dr. Ryking, who was then killed on orders by the mutant mercenary known as Maverick. Word of his father's death triggered his worst seizure to date, and Carter escaped from his hospital that night, relieved to be released from his father's control and vowing never again to be a guinea pig. The nursing and security staff tried to taser him, but he rerouted his plasma energy through the coils in order to hit the staff, increasing the gun's effects and reducing the staff to skeletons. Realizing that taser guns and the wires inside of them had conductive properties, he included them as part of a cybernetically enhanced costume designed to keep his powers in check. Wearing this new uniform, he decided to attend his father's funeral and disrupt the services. Xavier happened to be there, and when he mind-linked with Hazard, he recognized him as his old friend, Carter Ryking, who in turn kidnapped him and brought him to the Black Womb site where their fathers had worked, hoping to find answers. But they didn't, and he was defeated by the X-Men's blue team after a brief battle. He was incarcerated, where he met up with fellow 90s mutant time capsule Adam X the Extreme, who was looking for information on Dr. Milbury, and then Hazard lost his powers on M-Day, but incarceration couldn't hold him, so he was transferred back to his father's hospital. As it turns out, in his history, Alexander Ryking, Brian Xavier, Kurt Marko, and Jacob Shaw were scientists recruited into the Black Womb Project at Alamagordo, New Mexico by Dr. Nathan Milbury and Amanda Mueller. Milbury, as we all know, was secretly the altered mad scientist called Mr. Sinister, and Amanda Mueller was one of the first mutants he ever met, a woman with the power of an unprecedented lifespan, and the matriarch of the Summers family. All four men were recruited not only because of their scientific backgrounds, but also because of their genetic backgrounds. Each man was likely to produce offspring containing the X gene. And indeed, both Carter Ryking and Charles Xavier tested positive for mutant DNA at a young age. As Dr. Milbury, Mr. Sinister took DNA samples from each of the children at Alamagordo for his Cronus project. You see, Mr. Sinister recognized that he was powerful, but not completely immortal, and he wanted to ensure his survival even after his death. The purpose of Carter, Charles, and the other mutant children at Alamagordo was for Mr. Sinister to imprint them with a coded sample of his own DNA. So at the time of his death, the Cronus machine would preserve Mr. Sinister's mind and transmit it into one of his children, recoding their body into a host for his own mind and abilities. However, certain circumstances prevented the Cronus project from fully taking effect. You see, Jacob Shaw, he was no fool, and had provided his son, Sebastian Shaw, with a device that protected him from Sinister. Cain Marko, he was protected by the mystical helmet of the Juggernaut, and Charles Xavier had his own telepathic abilities that helped him resist Mr. Sinister. For Carter Ryking, unfortunately, he had no such protections, and when the loss of his X gene on M-Day, he was no longer strong enough to contain Mr. Sinister's mind. As the Cronus effect machine cycled through each potential host in turn, Carter suffered greater seizures and a greater deterioration of his mental faculties than before, and could not withstand it and suffered a fatal aneurysm. He lived and died as a lab rat because of the sins of his father. Also, it should be noted that Carter Ryking, no one ever actually called him Hazard. I mean, yeah, the name was mentioned on the cover of his first appearance and on the warning label of the door to his hospital room, but no one ever actually called him that on panel. His co-creator, Fabian Nicieza, stated that they didn't use the code name in the story because they couldn't decide whether he was a supervillain or a superhero. But as it turns out, he's more of a tragic figure. Also, at first, I thought he had telepathy because he appeared to be reading Charles Xavier's mind when he crashed his father's funeral. But we can chalk that up to Mr. Sinister experimenting on him and Xavier as children, during which time Carter did exhibit the power to perceive energy patterns, as he saw through Mr. Sinister's Dr. Milbury disguise and was able to see the distinctive red diamond on his forehead. Also, Carter's father, Alexander Ryking. He was a billionaire, but did he leave Carter his fortune? Or at least as a beneficiary with a trustee? I doubt it. I sincerely doubt it, considering how coldly he treated his son. Another thing, mutants that have plasma energy generating abilities, more often than not, they can't control their powers. You got Threnody and most notably Havoc. But in the case of Hazard, his uncontrolled energy bursts were exacerbated by his seizures. Speaking of which, one of his caretakers at his father's hospital was named Nurse Stimpy right here. Yeah, Nurse Stimpy. It's a nod to that animated 90s TV series, The Ren and Stimpy Show. Also, As mentally unstable as he was from spending most of his life in that hospital isolated, how was he able to build a cybernetic suit and get his hands on that file that he sent Charles Xavier? I mean, the man has no social graces and clearly lacks subtlety. But all in all, he's a 90s time capsule, a throwaway villain from that era with a cool-sounding code name that was never used, except for in the one time that he had a trading card right here for X-Men Series 2. Alright, Shackhousers, that's what I got for you this week. Comment on this video below, and for my 100th video, tell me who you think I'm going to do or what you think I should do. But I'll talk to you soon. Later!
Mansion, apartment.
Shack house. Yes!
Yeah.